Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jill Nogueras, and I'm the English coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education. I have a variety of colleagues on the line with me today. In our Department of Learning, we have our elementary English and reading specialist, Carmen Curick, and our middle school English specialist, Colleen Cassida. And from the Office of Student Assessment, I have my colleagues with me, Lauren Zielinski, Catherine Ringley, and Chris Cicera. And Catherine and Carmen will be hosting the majority of this webinar today, and myself, Colleen, Catherine, and Chris will be supporting your answers in the chat. So just so you are aware, we are going to use the chat feature. We would appreciate it if when posting your questions, you could please use the drop-down menu and send it to all attendees so that everyone can see your question, so that when we respond, everyone also sees the answer. That kind of helps everyone. If it just goes to the panelists, then we can't support everyone in that matter. And a lot of times your questions could really help several people who are on the line with us today. So if you could just be mindful of that as you are posing your questions, as anything arises during today's webinar. We're thrilled you could join us on this rainy Friday afternoon. Just to give some more details, we will be recording, we are currently recording this session right now, and we will be posting the recording, the PowerPoint, and any additional materials to our Assessment Literacy Supports website. So you don't have to screenshot every single slide today or take a bunch of pictures or write everything down, because we will be posting it. We do ask that you share it with your colleagues or anybody else who might benefit from the information in here. And this is something that will be available beyond today and for a very long time. So you are not limited to what you hear in this presentation in this 1 hour. You will have the opportunity to go back, reflect, think about it some more, check out some more items, and then follow up with questions as you think of any. So just to kind of give us the scope of where we are right now, last spring we had an emergency school closure because of the pandemic. But then in June, Governor Northam did announce a phased reopening plan for Virginia schools. And this is called the Recover, Redesign, Restart plan that Dr. Lane shared with superintendents across the Commonwealth to figure out how we could return to learn. So this is very different than where we ended the school year last year with an emergency closure, because right now our schools are open, even if it's in a variety of ways. And from that document, we want to talk a little bit about today is authentic learning, because we're talking about that we need to provide our students with authentic learning opportunities and what instructional strategies look like to provide those opportunities so that students can make informed career choices, bridge some of those skill gaps that were already there, but then maybe also were compounded by the school closures. How do we get them to enhance their critical thinking, increase their engagement, motivate them in a variety of settings, and think about how we can get them to provide and understand multiple perspectives on issues. So these are all things we're thinking about as we're exploring the variety of learning environments that we find ourselves in this year. So that kind of informs a lot of what you're going to see in today's presentation. Additionally, last year, the Department of Learning and the Office of Student Assessment worked together to interview schools across the Commonwealth that had seen an increase in their reading SOL scores. This is a variety of elementary, middle, and high schools that show different representative demographics, urban, rural, small, big, you name it. And we interviewed them and then shared our findings with the field so they would have some of the best practices that those schools and school divisions shared about what they thought was impacting their positive SOL scores. So some of the material comes from that webinar, or the ideas I should say, and we have linked the webinar here so that if you want to go back and take a look at that, it is available to you. But part of this was thinking about how we could support the transition from the 2010 to the 2017 English Standards of Learning, and think about those best practices that school divisions were using, but then now what could we use for specific examples of standards of learning content, plus the progression of reading skills aligned with best practices to support our students instructionally with the new English standards of learning. So as we go through this, we are going to be demonstrating some assessment style question stems to help you think about how you can ask students, you know, as they've been working on these skills, how you might ask for formative assessment or to scaffold a discussion or to see where their learning is or where it might have stopped on a certain topic. So please know that while we are going to be showing you some assessment style questions, these aren't necessarily meant for assessment purposes. These are to show you some guided practice and ways of assessing and asking questions about certain skills and concepts. So they're really to provide you with insight into the 2017 standards of learning and how you might get at some of the new standards that you find in the grade level in which you currently teach, and how you might get at addressing those at a variety of levels, from very basic to far more complex, so that you can support all of the readers that are in your classroom. So keeping in mind that this is supplemental information to support all of the materials that we already have out there. This is not to narrow the focus so much that you only approach it in the examples that we've provided in this webinar, because your focus really needs to be on the standards as a whole and the selection of authentic text that will support those standards. So while we have selected a couple of skills to model with today, we would never want you just to teach or focus on one skill at a time, because that's not how our English standards of language work. If you look carefully at the English Standards of Learning curriculum framework, you'll see that we have this sentence in here, but really what we're trying to get at is that the English Standards of Learning skills spiral. Our students are learning about setting in 2nd grade. Our students are learning about setting in 12th grade. What changes is how we use our understanding of setting and apply that knowledge to more complex skills, tasks, and texts. So that is what changes. We might talk about what is a setting as we're learning what a setting is in, say, 2nd grade, but we're in 8th grade, we might be talking about how that setting impacts a character's decision and impacts that character development. So learning about the skill of setting is something where the purpose of it changes and gets more complex. And that's why we like to talk about this spiral, because we keep coming back to it. And while many school divisions follow pacing guides that might provide opportunities to hone in on a specific set of skills for certain blocks of time, we are never in a position in English language arts to focus our instruction solely on, say, cause and effect, and do that for 2 weeks and then move on thinking that we've covered it. There might be a time in our year where cause and effect is a pretty strong focus because of the text we've decided to use. But as we see cause and effect present itself in a variety of texts as the year goes on, we're always going to circle back to that skill and give students the practice they need to think about it and consider it. This is not a course where we just finish something and move on and never return to it. So we are like a spiral, and that spiral starts really small, but it gets really big and purposeful as we go up through the grade levels. So I just kind of want to put that out there because, like I said, while we are modeling certain skills today, it is because they are found in the texts that we are modeling. And when you go through those texts, you'll see that other skills are also prevalent, and we have given you some supports to address some of those things. But what we are trying to do is use what the text is offering, because that is how we get the most rich experiences for our students. So we're going to go through a 4-step process today, where we're going to talk about selecting that authentic text. And probably what I want to make sure that I am most explicit about here is that we want to make sure that our text that we select for instruction is a grade level appropriate text. We want our students to be working instructionally in grade level texts. We understand that our students may need some more instructional scaffolds or some independent support and may independently be working out of a different grade level text in their independent or small group reading time. But when we are presenting material with students, we really want to use that grade level text because it is going to be rich in vocabulary and rich in structure, and it's going to provide many opportunities for you as a teacher to really show students and demonstrate what they need to be doing, in this case at a 5th grade level. And again, there will be times where you will use maybe lower or more skillful text, but when we're talking about a text that we're using for our whole group or our whole class, we want to make sure that we're giving our students plenty of experience, exposure, and time with grade level texts, because that is what they're going to be expected to do at the end of a year. And then step 2, we're going to look at the content and the progression of the standards, because it's going to be really, really important that no matter what grade level we teach, we spend some time looking at the grade level before and the grade level after, because we do have students sitting in our classrooms, wherever those classrooms may be right now, that fall in both of those categories. And to be honest, your group could be even wider than that. But with losing 10 weeks of instruction last year, there's going to be material from last year that we need to cover and fold into our new instruction for this year. And there's going to be students who kind of got ahead because they were working by themselves last year and need that further academic push. So we need to look at those standards and determine, where do my students fall? What do I need to make up for and cover? And also, how can I push my students moving forward? And then also really looking to see what changes year to year, because it is important that I teach what I am responsible for in my year, because the next year is depending on me to do that. If you look at how the skills and the standards spiral as we move through K-12. Then we're going to look at some sample question starters that really address the several skills that we have here. And then expand that into some instructional resources that we have at the Virginia Department of Education to kind of further those studies as you're working with your students. So that is kind of like the setup for the day. And I'm going to be turning it over now to Lauren Zielinski to talk to you about selecting authentic text.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jill mentioned, we are so excited that you were able to carve out some time from your busy days to join us for this. We are just so excited and hopeful that when you walk away from this webinar, you will be able to take those 4 steps that Jill just went through and that Carmen and I will get into a little bit more explicitly, and really be able to apply these, not just through the examples that we give you today, but in text moving forward within your classroom. So jumping right into that first step about selecting authentic text, just like when you're within your classrooms and you're with your students and you set a purpose, you set the purpose for the day, you set the purpose for that lesson, you need to kind of set that purpose also for yourself as you are reviewing and you are reading these different texts that you might want to use in your classroom. You definitely want to make sure that you do some pre-reading of the text to make sure that it is grade level appropriate, as Jill mentioned earlier, and that it does indeed support the skills in which you are looking to either introduce or review and continue to spiral for your students. If you identify a text that you would like to use and you realize that, you know what, this doesn't really hit the skills I need based on my student data of what they're needing additional support with, that doesn't mean that text is bad. It simply means you'll use it a little bit later and you find a different text that will be able to support the needs that your students are showing that they are requiring from you. Make sure that when you're reading that text, you spend time to locate the different examples that are going to support your purpose, and that they truly are spiraling. And as we've talked many times before, it's not just a checklist to get it one and done, but to truly keep giving students authentic learning experience in that text. Once you've determined which text you want, you always want to make sure that not only are you hitting and discussing those specific skills, but that you find ways to incorporate other skills that you've already talked about and ways that you have been able to give students the opportunity to continue applying their learning throughout multiple texts. You know, you want to make sure that that is how you are supporting your students. So as we kind of talk about on that next slide, if the passage supports what you have identified, that is wonderful. Make sure that the skills found in that passage are really where you need your kids to be, and support ways to have deep, rich discussion so you can spiral those skills. Also, when you are selecting that authentic text, just make sure that if you do move to a new passage and you choose that the one that you had just reviewed was not able to identify all the skills you wanted, again, just use it later, and make sure though that you're not forcing a skill for the sake of teaching it, but that you are giving them that authentic learning experience through the authentic text that you are reading with them. To help support what we mean by all of this, we have provided for you guys with, along with this presentation, we have provided specific passages with annotations to support how this idea of spiraling and reviewing and helping to really set that purpose can be accomplished. So throughout this grade level presentation and the other grade level presentations that we are providing this past week and next week, you will see that there are annotations to support what you would like to talk about with your students. Again, as Jill noted, we set our purpose to identify specific skills that passage or the passages were truly rich in providing examples and support. That doesn't limit what could be additionally discussed, and is not meant to have skills in isolation, but instead to have skills truly embedded in the reading and the discussion within your classroom. We did want to note though about the annotations, just a couple of things. When you do see them within the document that will be provided for you, oftentimes you will see that it says VITA program. And while it does say VITA program, we just want you to know that that is part of our IT program here. However, these annotations have indeed been specifically written for you all to use and as a way to support what we are talking about here today. So these were not just annotations that were provided by a machine, but indeed they were provided by us for you. And as you can see in this screenshot, where you only see the first two paragraphs of the passages we'll be talking about today, this indeed is just that, a screenshot and a slight insight into what you get to experience. And we tried to provide you with context, we tried to provide you with discussion points and with guiding questions throughout the passages to help, again, not just use this within this passage, but the same ideas moving forward. Today, we are specifically going to be talking about a paired passage. We do know that with the 2017 standards, this idea of paired passages is something that I think everyone is really excited to learn more about and to have more examples of. So we really wanted to support you with an article and a poem paired together about Nellie Bly. So again, you will be provided with that Word document for the additional support, and we will provide these different passages for you. Please remember that the skills we are talking about today are the ones that we felt were most prevalent within these passages, but there's absolutely opportunities to continue to spiral in additional skills for your students. So the skills that we pulled out for these texts are talking about using context to determine meaning, comparing and contrasting details between text, using text features to predict and categorize information, and identifying cause and effect relationships. So you will see throughout those annotations support for that, and throughout the rest of this presentation, ways in which that you could continue to support these skills in authentic text.
Good afternoon, everybody. So once you have identified your text and noted the skills and the features that that text lends itself to, the ones that Lauren shared on the previous slide, the next step is step 2, examining the content and progression of standards for SOL 5.4a. And then we will kind of continue on in the slides to follow on the other skills that she had mentioned additionally. So the first thing you'll want to do after selecting that text is really cross-check with the standards and curriculum framework to make sure that the discussion that you are kind of designing to facilitate with students and really dive into is aligned with what the standards that you're looking at for your grade level. But you want to look at the grade levels before you, and also the grade levels that come after you to make sure that you're forming discussion questions and discussion topics that really allow access for all the students in your classroom. You're going to have students who are maybe not ready for that question yet, but maybe you can scaffold it in a way that will help them get at the grade level content. So it's really just important to look at those grade levels that come before you and become after you, so you know what prerequisite knowledge they're coming with, and then what you as a 5th grade teacher are kind of working towards to get them ready for 6th grade. So the skill identified first was using context to determine meaning. And so you can see the standards listed here. 4.4a is using context to clarify meanings of unfamiliar words. 5.4a, using context to clarify meaning of unfamiliar words and phrases. And then 6.4c, use context and sentence structure to determine meanings and differentiate among multiple meaning of words. One thing we do want to point out is that it is important to look not only just at the standards, but also in the curriculum framework in the essential skills and knowledge section, because sometimes with standards, you may find additional skills that accompany these standards that you will want to take a look at to be sure to include in your instruction. So I'm going to show you one example here with these standards. But so you're looking at the standards on your slide, but when thinking about the essential skills that come in the curriculum framework along with that. So in 4th grade, students are using context as a clue to clarify meaning of unfamiliar words or phrases. And then in parentheses, it'll say definitions, examples, or restatements of text. So really they're kind of learning about all the different ways that context can look and using it as a clue to begin that process. And then in 5th grade, using context as a clue to infer the correct meanings of unfamiliar words and phrases. So you can see how it increases a little bit in complexity going from 4th to 5th grade, and then really diving into multiple meaning words as well as students go across the grade level. So just something to think about as you're looking at these standards and forming discussion is always look at that essential skills section, because sometimes the standards may look the same across grade levels, but those essential skills may help clarify that a little bit. So moving on to the next slide, the next skill that Lauren identified previously was comparing and contrasting details between text. So here you're looking at 4.5i, 5.5l, 6.5l, and they are all comparing and contrasting details in literary and informational nonfiction text. So one thing to point out is this is the standard that is including paired passages. So we did mention in the 4th grade webinar yesterday that even though paired text and this standard are mentioned in the 4th grade blueprints, testing blueprints, paired passages are not tested in 4th grade. This is just the standard that also discusses details. So if you see it in 4th grade, it means that it's just looking at details in the text. But paired passages a student may see paired passages in 5th grade. So just something to think about as well. So again, just want to kind of share some of the essential skills that go along with that, just to kind of illustrate that point again. So in 4th grade, analyzing the similarities and differences between paired fictional text and informational nonfiction text. And then moving on to sixth grade, I'm going to take a little bit of a jump here because fifth grade is very similar because students again in fourth grade are kind of beginning that process, fifth grade firming up, and then sixth grade comparing and contrasting two or more texts on the same topic with similar themes. So just something to think about as you're increasing complexity of going across the grade levels and forming questions for discussion in your class. So then the next skill that Lauren identified previously was using text features to predict and categorize information. So you're looking on your screen at 4.6a, using text features such as type, headings, and graphics to predict and categorize information. And then you're looking at 5.6a, use text features such as type, headings, and graphics to predict and categorize information. But then in sixth grade, in 6.6a, skimming materials using text features, and then it names some of them there to predict and categorize information. So again, just something to think about as you go on. Some of those essential skills often will mention some different text features, maybe as that were introduced across grade levels. So just always check that essential skills section as well. And then the next one, since we have a paired set for you all today, we have a few more identified skills, but the next one is distinguishing between cause and effect. So looking at 4.6F, 5.6H, and 6.6I. You can read those there on your screen, but just initially looking at in fourth grade, really distinguishing between cause and effect, really kind of looking at those features of what is a cause and what is an effect. And then in fifth and sixth grade, really identifying those relationships. So again, thinking about looking at that essential skill section in fifth grade, we're also additionally talking about recognizing transitional words and phrases the authors use to signal organizational patterns. And that would include a cause and effect relationship. So looking for those if and then type statements that might be in text, looking at organizational structures in text that have that cause and effect relationship in fifth grade. So really thinking of it in that way as well. And then now I believe Lauren is going to take it. We've identified our text, we've looked at our skills, and now Lauren is going to take you through a process of some question and some discussion starters.
Thank you, Carmen. I do want to clarify before we jump too far into these question starters, the fact that while you will see these question starters today, identified and sort of pulled out specifically by SOL, as you see here right on the title of that slide. We are by no means saying that we only would want you to ask cause and effect questions and then go back and only ask text feature questions. We did this for organizational purpose, so it would be easy to identify and locate where these different question starters are, and to really just give you a jumping off point for further discussion and for further ways to use these starters moving forward. So if you notice on these question starters, we did our best to truly support what Carmen just walked us through in terms of how, though we are in fifth grade, we do sometimes need to look back and look forward to truly meet the needs of our students. And so when you start right at that first question where it talks about identifying unfamiliar words in the passage, and maybe they're going to identify one word or two words, and that's where you get the freedom with these question starters, where you can truly personalize how you need to use these for your student need. Because if a student isn't even really sure what words they don't know, it's difficult to then continue to bring them through the progression of the skill. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving you some opportunities to really meet your students where they are and then continue to move them forward. As you can see, some of these question starters lend themselves to being made into multiple choice questions, or they lend themselves to become an open-ended or even a writing question. Because what better way to truly determine student mastery than if they can write about it, if they can talk about it, if they can teach others about it. So as we sort of progress through these different question starters, you will see that idea of where you could insert a word from the text or insert a location from the text And that's so then there is that freedom of choice based on the authentic text that is truly meeting the needs of your students. So if we look at the next slide, just for this context SOL, you guys can see that very last bullet point there asks them to create an original sentence for each unfamiliar word using the word correctly in context. So that is truly helping you guys see, can the student produce this on their own? If they can produce it on their own, you know that you're in a great space with them. But you also don't want to forget the next time you read a passage to ask them again about unfamiliar words and using that context to support their learning and to arrive at that definition. Like Carmen did talk about, we did have more skills identified due to the fact that we're giving you a paired passage. And this passage was particularly paired together because it shared a common topic in that they were both discussing the life of Nellie Bly. And so it allowed for several additional skills to be identified. And so some additional question starters that we have for you for some of the other skills, like comparing and contrasting the text or different parts of the text. On that next slide, you'll see, again, we started you at a level of really just determining, you know, can a student complete a diagram comparing and contrasting information from one text to another? Can they do that? That's great. So then let's move them forward. Let's start to continue to support the progression of the skill from 4th to 5th to 6th. Again, you'll see that there are opportunities to insert a particular name or a person or event from the text to, again, personalize that question stem to ensure that it is meeting the authentic text you are presenting the students with. A really great piece of some of these question starters, and a lot of these question starters that we're providing you with, is that though they might be focused on comparing and contrasting or on text features, they truly allow for an opportunity for different skills to be inserted. Maybe I want to complete a diagram about the character development, or maybe I want to complete a diagram, you know, talking about the different internal and external conflicts. You know, it really, these lend themselves to a lot of different ways to support student learning within your classroom. And again, just like with context here with 5.5L, we brought you through a progression to where, again, we end with kind of like a writing task. On that next slide, you'll see where it says, write a response explaining how the word choice from that specific text that you're reading impacts, and then provide something that the text impacts. So it really just allows for a lot of personalization and a lot of ways to ensure that our skills are being spiraled, our skills are being assessed for the sake of student mastery, and being able to apply it in different texts and different tasks that are being asked of the student. If we look at some examples for text features, we'll see again that idea that we started with, can you identify the text features in the passage or the text that's being read? If students can identify, then we can continue to build with the rigor of the skills and what is listed in that essential skills and knowledge that Carmen talked about, and truly make sure that students are able to do what the skill is asking of them. It's also really important to note that, again, to help really incorporate skills being taught in coordination with each other and with the skill as a whole, these starters are really great places for just that, starting even discussion with your students in the classroom. You might start your discussion by asking them a question about a text feature, but perhaps you know, you're going to ask them to give a heading for a specific paragraph you just read, which is then going to tie directly into main idea. And that main idea can then tie into, well, what should we include in a summary? There's so many ways to continue to support student learning and to really continue to review and scaffold those skills and spiral them into every piece of authentic text that is presented to them within the classroom. And just like our other skills, our text features, once again, we left you with a writing task. because we wanted to make sure that, again, students could take that step and apply through writing. So we have lots of different ways here in these different slides as examples. And when you get into the annotation of the different texts that we have provided also, you might see similar questions and guiding questions to support the reading. But again, we don't just leave you there with some question starters. We provide you with ways to encourage discussion and ways to just ensure students are engaged, they're focused, and they're comprehending while incorporating the skills that the text supports. So that last skill that we had to look at for these two passages was indeed cause and effect. And again, we wanted to start with that idea of, let's see, can they define a cause and effect? Because if that is a place where we see that gap in learning, then we need to make sure that we go back and we address it so we can then continue to ask them, could you identify a cause from this text that we're reading? Could you identify an effect from what we're reading? So it really helps to ensure that what is being asked in the classroom, the words that are being used, saying cause and effect instead of how does, without using the words from the SOL is not supporting the students. By using the vocabulary in the SOLs and in that curriculum framework, you are setting that student up to be able to apply that skill from text to text to text. And again, with this cause and effect, please remember that, you can easily say, could you identify and maybe you want the students to identify a conflict. Can they identify the resolution? And there's so many different ways to apply these question starters as you are continuing to present skills to your students in your classroom. And again, with this one, we left you with that last bullet with a writing task that could be used to, again, really ensure that that student mastery is there and that you can, again, not love it and leave it, but continue to use it in authentic learning experiences for your students. And now Carmen is going to give us an amazing resource for you all to use instructionally moving forward as well.
So moving into step 4, last but certainly not least, is exploring instructional resources. So I would explore these instructional resources, after you finish identifying your text, looking at those skills, and forming those good discussion questions. Really explore these resources and the resources in your division to look for alignment and look for additional ways that you could possibly use that text in your classroom. But then also, after possibly having a discussion with students and actually using those questions that you've decided for your discussion or to move the discussion along, to then think about what were students' answers, where are they in their development and their content knowledge within this text and with these skills, and then go back and explore these resources again to think about, what do I need to go back and reteach? What do I need to dive deeper into? So we are going to explore our comprehensive literacy English instructional plans with you this afternoon as an example of a way to do this, and they are linked on this slide at the top for you. And we want to show you first how they're kind of structured to help you understand that piece, and then we'll look at some specific resources that align with the skills that Lauren shared. So this slide is a screenshot of the website that houses these resources, and you can see that the hyperlinks are all listed there for you. But just to share how they're categorized by strand, by English strand, and then they are put into grade bands. They're put into grade bands because many of them can be adapted to multiple grades. You can use them across several grades and just adapt them with a different text, or maybe ask a different question. But I would explore instructional resources across grade bands as well, because many of these can be used, are timeless and can be used across elementary school or even into middle. So now we're going to go into kind of a screenshot of what one looks like. So when you click one of those links and it pulls them up, you see 2 screenshots on your slide, and this is just to show you how they are initially structured. So the goal of these instructional plans is to determine how, or to demonstrate how the 4 strands of English can be integrated during instruction? How can we integrate communication, reading, writing, and research all together during instruction? So at the top, you can see the strands that are addressed during this instructional plan. The primary strand is always listed first, and then any integrated strands are listed next. And then it lists the essential understandings that are important for students to know and be able to do once they've completed this instructional plan. And then it goes into the SOLs, again, to illustrate integration. The primary standard, the primary SOL that really is the focus, is listed first. And then the reinforced standards are always listed next. There's also an academic background section that discusses any prerequisite knowledge or vocabulary that students will need in order to be successful with this plan. So thinking about what they have learned in the grade levels prior that may be important if you have a student who is an English learner, or a student who maybe just needs that scaffold a little bit ahead of time to think about, let's go back and look at some of these things we've covered, or pre-teaching some vocabulary just to help them be successful with this. And then the steps to the plan themselves are listed. What is the teacher doing? What are the students doing? There are no time limits or time ranges on this plan because some of them could be built into a mini unit themselves. And some of them could be done over a period of a couple days. It just depends on the teacher, the needs of the students, the curriculum, and how the teacher builds it for the classroom. And then at the end are modifications and accommodations and extensions that can be made. So how can you extend this into research or writing? And then maybe we could provide some sentence frames for students. So the one we have for you today is using, well, we have several, but the first one is using context to determine meaning of unfamiliar words. Again, to go along with that skill that was identified. This particular instructional plan is on using context to determine the meaning of a word. And this plan really dives into really getting at that standard of using sentence structure also in order to support context, using what we know about where the word is placed in the sentence and how the word is used in the sentence. So not just thinking about what the context was, or was it a definition or an example, but also thinking about how words are used in text themselves. So a really important plan to kind of look at and think about as you're crafting instruction for using context. The next one is comparing and contrasting details in text. And so this actual plan is listed in the 6th grade plans, but can be easily adapted for 5th grade. This particular one is using a paired text set and looking at 2 different types of text about weather, and really discussing how they maybe have the same topic, but what is similar and different between them. So thinking about 5th grade, you could really dive into the details of those 2 texts and compare those as well. The next instructional plan that we have linked for you here is using and gathering information with text features. This plan has lots of opportunities for teacher and student choice when designing instruction for your students. Teachers can choose to have students do research online or use a text of their choice to kind of to do this one. But students will be collecting text features as they're looking at whatever the text is, whether it's online research or a text of their choice, and then really working on describing how that particular feature helped them gain more understanding on that topic. And it also has students working together and collaborating, which also just really hits at those 5 C's and getting at that college career readiness. And the last one is cause and effect and its impact on plot. So this is a good example, again, of why it's important to explore all of the instructional plans, not just the ones for your grade level, because depending on the text you use, this can be easily adapted for several grade levels. But this one, again, is one that was particular in the 6th to 8th grade band, but it can easily be adapted for 5th grade, discussing cause and effect. It has the teacher introducing the concept through a familiar text, and then students dive deeper into the topic with another text, and then again working together. So I urge you to go look at all of the instructional plans, but when looking at the text that Lauren shared today, the paired text set, these are particularly valuable following up with students when using those. So I believe Jill is going to close us out and share some important resources for you all.
Thank you, Carmen and Lauren. I appreciate the fabulous information. Yes, wanted to make sure that we left you with a plethora of resources to support you as you move through the 2020-2021 school year. What we have noticed is that our website can be a little complicated to use, and especially when we're working across offices and have different web pages on our website. So we decided that it would be best if in this presentation we kind of collected the best of the best resources from each of our offices and put them in one location for your ease of use. So what you see on this first slide is a link to the English Standards of Learning and Testing page. That link at the top there will take you to our Standards of Learning page that houses the standards, the curriculum frameworks, the reading progressions, all of the progressions, the crosswalk, all of that information and material is there. What you see next are the grades 3 through 8 and end of course reading blueprints. These blueprints are new because they are written for the new assessments that are aligned to the 2017 English Standards of Learning. So these are not the old blueprints. These are the blueprints that are aligned to the tests that students will take in spring of 2021 and every year moving forward because they align with our new standards. So these have been posted for a while because we were supposed to have these assessments take place last spring, but with the emergency school closures, that didn't happen. So this spring of 2021, will be the first year that these new standards are tested. So we've moved beyond our crosswalk year and we are fully in the 2017 implementation. So you can find those blueprints, and I'm really hopeful that one of your takeaways from today is that you realize that it's far more important to go beyond what the blueprint says, because the blueprint is going to list that standard. But I think as both Lauren and Carmen successfully demonstrated, sometimes it's important to go even deeper than that and look in the curriculum framework to find those essential skills and processes that the students need to be successful within that standard. So the nitty-gritty details and extra support are actually found in the curriculum framework. Again, we mentioned that the progression charts are available for your use. We did have these with the 2010 standards. And for those of you who have been teaching 5th grade for a while, you remember that they were blue, and we have them by strand for each of our strands. Communication, reading, writing, grammar, and research. We have created these again with the progression charts to show how they align for the 2017 Standards of Learning, and this time they are orange. So please make sure that you are using the orange progression charts. You can throw out the blue ones at this point. And then again, we have the curriculum framework and the Standards of Learning. We also have a link to computer adaptive testing because, as you know by now, the 5th grade reading Standards of Learning assessment has moved to a computer adaptive test. So there is a website dedicated to information that's been gathered about computer adaptive testing. So if you'd like to learn more, that link is there. We've also included a document here that explains the differences between a passage-based computer adaptive test and a traditional test. So kind of in making that transition from the traditional test to the CAT test, what does that mean for students and what does that look like and how do I know how they're the same and different? Also wanted to link to the page to this overall literacy webinar series for a few reasons. One, because this is where all of the information will be presented for each grade level. And two, because on October 1st, we did do an overarching overview presentation that was more global in nature, that was K-12, where we kind of walked through how this series would work and how it would support teaching and learning. I'm recommending that you either go back and watch it or at least go through the materials that were included there, the PowerPoint, because what we did there was to explain which standards of learning skills would be covered in each of the grade level presentations. So while you know which standards of learning question stems we reviewed today that were tightly aligned to the passages we used today, the other grade level standards of learning and question stem topics are addressed in that overarching overview webinar. So if you are interested in seeing how we work on main idea and summarizing, well, then you may want to check one of the other grade levels to see those question stems. Because again, the question stems were selected based on what our authentic text really kind of demonstrated would be rich and fruitful and worth doing. So what you're going to see is that different question stems are available at different grade levels because of how they match the text. And I know Lauren said this at one point during her discussion today, but I also want to reiterate that in all reality, we're never in a situation where we give students a passage and we only ask them cause and effect questions, or we only ask them fact and opinion questions. So while our demonstration today really honed in on a couple of specific skills and gave you scaffolded question types to address those skills, we would never be in a situation only to do that. Which is why you're going to see that in the annotation, we even pull out some other skills as discussion points. The whole purpose of our reading SOL test is to look at reading comprehension as a whole, so we would never limit ourselves to just one or two topics. So this was just to highlight and show you the scaffolding on the progression of skills and how to address those questions in a variety of ways to support student learning. We've also linked the Recover, Redesign, and Restart document that I talked about in the beginning here for your use. There's a frequently asked questions about the passage-based CAT testing that we've provided here for you. There's also a link to the SOL practice items that are available in TestNav 8. And the practice items that are there have been aligned to the 2017 standards of learning. So they definitely support and model what the 2017 standards of learning content looks like and how it is aligned. But it's also there for the purpose of showing how the TEI items work and to give students opportunities to practice with the online tools and the features that are in TestNav 8, and then also to figure out and learn how to navigate the program so that that is not a complicating factor for students on test day. So that material is there for you. However, since we've been under the 2017 standards of learning since 2017, we do have a couple of years of English SOL institutes and deeper learning conferences where Virginia educators from all over the Commonwealth presented around the state to provide information and instructional best practices around the new standards. So we provided those links for you to check out and kind of see some of that material and the support that they have for you. Then we also have the English instructional plans. I want to say there's around 130 of those plans posted, and I know Carmen went over a couple of them with you today, but there is so much information there. You could have weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of instruction there if you take the time to sift through and see what works for you and your students. Again, the texts that are used in those plans are texts that we have access to and we are allowed to use online and put online. Please know that you could take any of those plans and adapt them to the text that you want to use and what you have access to and what is appropriate for your community. So you don't need to use them bit by bit and word for word. You can modify them and expand them, or just use a section of them, or take the whole plan but insert your own text, whatever works for you. But they are truly aligned with instructional practices that work with the 2017 standards of learning. Also on this last bit here, we have linked for you Superintendent's Memo 249-20, which is the update to the new standards of learning tests to kind of show you that for reading and history and social science, when you can expect certain standards of learning to be tested. So if you were to click on that link, you would see that any of the fall tests, which do not impact 5th grade reading, but any of the fall tests for fall of 2020 would be based on our 2010 standards. But when we move into spring 2021, all of the reading tests will move over to the 2017 standards of learning. So there is information there for your use. This is our contact information. We love hearing from people. We love to support and help people. And you can use that contact information at any time to reach us. If you share this 5th grade webinar with a colleague and they have questions, they can email us and ask if they weren't able to be with us today. But it's definitely something that will be posted. And I know I'm speaking to 5th grade now. We start with 6th grade on Monday. So if you're interested in looking at some of the skills that we're going to be looking at Monday afternoon at 3, you're welcome to join us for that one as well. I think you could pop some popcorn and check this out during a faculty meeting too. So whatever you can do to spread the word about these supports, I know we would be forever grateful, and I think that it would benefit students and teachers all over the Commonwealth. So we don't want to take up any more of your time. We realize that you are incredibly busy people, and we thank you for taking the time that you've spent with us today. And we hope that you found this useful. And please, again, this all will be posted on the assessment literacy webinar page, which I believe Colleen has posted in the chat for you. It's obviously not there yet because I'm still recording, but please, that is the page that you will look at. And for those of you that are here live with us today, you will get a automatically generated email tomorrow, or maybe it's Monday, I'm not sure, because it comes from Zoom, not me, that gives you an hour of PD credit for attending. So that comes directly from Zoom. It's supposed to come the day after, but in Zoom, I'm not sure if that's the business day after or the literal day after. So please know you will receive that letter tomorrow or Monday, and that this will also be on our YouTube channel and posted there for future use. So thank you again for your time, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.